Yes.
All right.
Good for you.
So I guess we're going to start. If everyone wants to take a seat towards the front. All right. So welcome to our presentation about the changing nature of collaborations. We're going to start with some introductions. I'll just briefly note that one of our collaborators, Shaylin Amio, had to leave early for personal reasons, so we'll be filling in on her slides. If we seem shaky on things, those were her parts. My name is Ariel Pate. I'm the assistant curator of photography at the Milwaukee Art Museum. I became involved in this because I was working at the Art Institute of Chicago with Tina on a microsite that focused on our photography collection and was really curatorially driven. And we ran into a lot of issues that I think we kind of talked through while putting this presentation together. All right.
I'm Taylor Peterson. I work at the Field Museum in the exhibitions department, and I project manage a lot of our digital and media-based stuff. I also came to this by way of Tina, and I was really interested in it because the Field Museum is a very large institution, and our digital efforts are quite siloed across different departments. I'm often having to reach out on the ground level to work with people. So just thinking through some strategies through lessons learned is why I was interested in this.
Hi, I'm Tina Shaw. I'm a developer here at the, I'm not here, at the Art Institute of Chicago. And yeah, I'll talk more about why, we're doing this forum in a little bit.
I'm Chris Wetterland, and I'm the Director of Education and Interpretation at the Corning Museum of Glass. And I got involved in this panel through our SIG, our educational SIG. I joined the SIG here at MCN, and these fine young women invited me to join the panel. I think one of the reasons that I thought I might have something to say about this is because I run collaborative teams at the Corning Museum of Glass. We have interpretive teams that work on interpretation for special exhibitions as well as permanent collection, and they are entirely cross-departmental teams from all over the museum, and they are responsible for all of the interpretation in our exhibitions, and they all work collaboratively. And maybe I'll say a little more about that later.
So, of course, a big deal is getting out of the silos. So we have this lovely graphic where you see people of different places in the hierarchies from different departments coming together into the same barn. Tina's now going to talk about why we're doing this.
Okay. So yeah, why are we having this forum? The idea for this topic originated from a personal struggle that I voiced in our Education and Interpretive Media SIG Basecamp. I was getting tired of being seen as just a developer on projects. Joining a project when the concept and designs were already done. In the past, I've worked in the design and user experience and education, and I felt like I could add value to those stages in the project. I also felt it important to be in the room from the very beginning of a project, no matter what your role is, understanding the concept and why you're doing this project, the target audience, and meeting everyone involved in the project too. All of this better informs the work that I do, and I would think would have better informed the work that everyone's doing. On the SIG Basecamp chat, I heard similar thoughts coming from people in other institutions that have various roles. And they were also trying to change the processes, allowing for more interdisciplinary collaborations, and starting with things like trying to make the digital department not be seen as just a service, but a collaborator from the very beginning. And so I began to ask myself, in a world of amateur photographers, interdisciplinaries, anti-disciplinaries, an increase of do-it-yourselfers, where learning is changing and how you define yourself is ever more complex, how do you collaborate in this day and age?
One of the first things I did when thinking about this panel is looked up the definition of collaboration, because you think of it as this positive thing that we're all going to do together. Isn't that so great? But the second definition is actually about treachery. And so I think we come into collaboration with this definition in the back of our minds about collaborating with the enemy. So a lot of what we're going to talk about is how to turn that around, focus on the positive definitions of collaboration. There's also a lot of myths around digital projects, and digital projects, of course, are really based on interdepartmental collaboration. And so some of the myths are that it's fast, inexpensive, simple. And while some of these are true, of course, not all of them are true all of the time. I think a lot of, nobody sees the back end. Curators, our interaction with digital is through Facebook or Instagram, where the user experience is made to be simple. And so the idea that behind all that, there's infinite decisions being made just doesn't come into our reality. So one of the themes that we're really going to talk about is transparency and just being totally upfront about the effort that digital teams are putting into a project. And that's so simple, but very easy to forget, I think.
Yeah, so on that note, we want to dive into some practical examples of when we can really bring people to the table and work through collaboration and try and understand what that means. So one of the moments we thought would be really easy to talk about, seems simple but a lot to do, is a project kickoff meeting launch. So this is when the institution has given the green light to start something, funding has been secured, and you're getting a team together. From the project manager perspective, there's some front-end work that's already done before you bring everyone to the table in terms of that top-level organization. But this is such an important moment because this is when, in just response to Tina's initial concerns, like getting that developer at those first meetings and everyone that needs to be involved in the project to execute it so everyone has an equal voice and feel that they have their own investment in it as well. So it's just a time to talk about the mission of the project, how it supports the institution's missions, its goals. Can talk about the target audience and intended use. I love talking about these things, even though the project might already have somewhat of that direction. I find that when I open up this conversation to the team who's very new to the idea, they bring up such good points to add to the discussion. They'll think about an extra user group that maybe wasn't thought of before, so we can kind of fold that in to the goals. So it's just a great conversation to have. It's also wonderful for everyone to get that content download from whoever the curator is or content advisor, coming from the science side of things. We love nothing more than having that FaceTime with our scientists. So just a really awesome document that we've kind of put together. I just stripped it down and made it shareable. But this kind of defines people, identifies everyone at the team, what their individual stake is in the project. I love that it gives people that responsibility and kind of outlines what they're supposed to do, but it also helps show how they need to work with other people or suggests that without streamlining them into a lot of specific things, because we will also talk about why we will blur the boundaries. But this is, I found, is a really practical and important starting point.
So include everyone. As the Victoria and Albert Museum worked on their website refresh, they invited their entire organization to their showcases that were held in the museum's theater instead of the confines of the digital offices. The theater was an inviting space where anyone and everyone could attend. Staff across the museum came and participated in the discussion, learning about the website redesign process, asking questions, and giving valuable feedback. A great example of a transparent process. So include everyone, why not? Sure, there's definitely times when including everyone may not be efficient, but I'm just trying not to be this guy who, is late to the party and wondering, what's going on.
So we thought this would be a good moment to just share why we're necessary at the table in our work. So as I mentioned, I'm a project manager, and I tend to do a lot more of that front-end stuff before most of the team joins in. But I guess I have to kind of know what other people do in their jobs to know when they need to be doing their job and when they need to be poked or if they're doing too much. So just kind of keep everything in balance.
From my point of view, just like Tina said in the very beginning, educators are often invited at the end of the exhibition process or the digital project. And, what are you going to do with the kids is basically the question we get asked a lot, or you're bringing the crayons, right? So that is not what we do, but I think we have a long way to go in educating all of our staff, curators, digital project managers, everyone about what education can bring to the table right up front.
From a curatorial perspective, it's really nice when digital is there from the beginning, because then we know what's possible. Like how we can really make this the best project it can be.
So everyone, really? As a senior director at my museum, I'm the one who says, oh, not everyone. Oh my God, that's horrible. That's messy. That's really hard. So what we've done, what we try to do at our museum is we have a core interpretive team that works on the exhibits, as I said, and we have tried to invite people to come to our interpretive meetings when they're necessary without having to include the entire institution in the entire process, because it just can't be done. So it's working for us right now. People are really happy to be included when we include them. The only bumps are that sometimes they have a different opinion about when they should be included, and that's something that just needs to be ironed out. But people do understand, at least at my museum, that we can't have the entire museum involved in the interpretive process 100% of the time. And I think it has a lot to do with trust as well. I think that if you can build trust among your colleagues, then they'll trust that you're looking out for their best interests. And people ask me if they can come. People say, I have something to share. I'd like to be included in this upcoming meeting, and that's great.
So in addition to including everyone, it's also important to look at everybody's goals for the project. I mean, there are institutional goals, how it ties into the museum's mission, but different fields have different measures of success. Curators have different priorities, digital departments have different priorities. We may even have priorities not necessarily related to the project, but like related to the department's status within the museum and like all those things. And so it's really important to recognize that though you're working towards the same thing, you want not different outcomes, but like parallel outcomes. My example is that curators love research. We love having footnotes and links to scholarly articles and things like that, whereas like that's not an obvious thing for some people.
Well, there's many different ways to measure the success of a project. In that same project that I worked with Ariel at the Art Institute, the project was done. We launched this website. Awesome, time to celebrate, right? But soon after, the curator was wondering why we weren't showing up in the Google search results, like why we weren't higher up in those Google search results, and it's a good question, of course, but I wish that question was asked in the beginning of the project. And I think setting everyone's measurements for success right in the beginning and having all that in mind in the beginning will help us strategize, okay, how can we show up, in the Google search results, like on the top page, and, how to maybe change the content so that happens too. So I think that, establishing those things right in the beginning is helpful.
So we do timing and tracking of all of our special exhibits at our museum, but we're also getting ready for a major reinstallation of our permanent collection. And it occurred to me that measuring visitor success maybe has something to do with formative evaluation as well as summative. So we actually did timing and tracking in our permanent collection galleries. The curators did the timing and tracking because the director believed that the curators needed to see for themselves what was happening in those galleries. And we have a pile of data now. And the whole idea is not to necessarily measure success of our reinstallation, because that obviously is going to come later, but to try to understand what we've currently got before we start dismantling it.
And I just think another quick example of something that you want to have on the table when you're in those initial phases is to figure out how you're going to measure visitor satisfaction along the way in development, which are testing you can do formatively, like in the process, and then wrapping up and kind of making sure you're on track and you're sustaining those goals. Also, what do we do here? We also kind of measure our success based on our way we talk to our colleagues across the field. We publish, win awards.
Yes,
Sometimes
and
not.
I wanted to share a great story about winning awards, which everybody wants. Of course, everybody wants that. But years and years ago, I worked on a project that was the combined digitized collections of the Minneapolis Institute of Art and the Walker Art Center, and it was for teachers. And we created this thing, and it was awesome, and we entered it in all the awards, and that year we won a Gold Muse Awards and Best of the Web at Museums in the Web. So that's the highest honors you can get from your colleagues. And then we went back home, and we took the thing into usability labs with teachers, and they literally could not use it. So be careful what you wish for when you look for accolades from your colleagues. Maybe collaborate with your users up front before you go for the award.
So now we're going to talk about sort of the collaborating throughout the life of the project. One of the really interesting things we found out was that at the beginning of the project, it's important to have clear goals and clear roles and make sure people know who's responsible for what and why, because that structure actually leads to better collaboration. Like once you know what everyone else is doing, you can use that to like improvise within the structure. It's sort of like jazz. Like you have the beat, you've got the regularity, and then you have the awesome improvisation that goes over the top of it. And hopefully you have like a nice coda at the end. That is the climax of your project.
Okay. And so during that process, and especially these days, there's a million tools out there for people to use to collaborate, right? I mean, there's a bunch here in the slide: Basecamp, Slack, Gmail, Google Docs, whatever. But it's really important with all these great tools to establish what tools you're going to use with the team right up front, and make sure that everyone is on board with that, because you might say we're going to use Slack, we're going to use Basecamp, but people may not be comfortable with all those tools. So I think it's really important to make sure that everyone is comfortable with using these tools and will use them. And also, what are you using the tools for? Like, is Basecamp to establish the deadlines and the to-do lists, and email is just for communication, or are you communicating with Slack? I have a small example here where recently I was heading to a meeting and got there and realized that the meeting was canceled and didn't know that. I was like, I didn't get an email about that. And I realized, oh, this was on Slack. So, just establishing what you're using and what you're using it for is very important.
Yeah, and I think, it's fun too. I find myself dipping in and trying things, and then I quickly abandon, because I'll do all this work to load in all my information and then I stop. So I think once you find something that works, and then sharing that across the people you work with and see what they think, and then hopefully you can gain some traction, because the constant changing over from project to project, changing your method or tool every time, that kind of is a burden on a lot of people. I have a hard time getting some people just to use Google, their calendar. So it's just kind of keeping that in mind. Some people just don't have a high tolerance for that. But no matter the method, it is just important to rely, and everyone needs to take responsibility for staying in the loop. And I'm kind of one of those people that has to feel like I always need to reach out to make sure, but sometimes I have to save my sanity in that way, and just have to, people will fulfill their duties. So another part of ongoing process that I think all of us are very familiar with, working on the types of projects we do, are bottlenecks, roadblocks, choke points, and how we deal with that. I think a lot of us agree that if we work with people who aren't used to working on these types of things, they're just not as technologically savvy, you tend to get the wrong feedback at the wrong time. Or it's good feedback, but it comes at the wrong time. There's not much you can do to address it. So some things that I've done that I think are really, really helpful are just establishing a standardized process as much as possible, and setting up milestones. User experience preview, user interface preview, final review before you get it going, and structuring those conversations in a way that allow people to give the feedback that you want. One thing that I have a good example. When I started doing what I do, when we would hold these forums to get approval to move things to the next phase, is I realized that our directors, which is kind of like our stakeholder sign-off group, had no idea how to look at wireframes at all. And the first couple things I did was just the meetings were horrible. We were getting like really bad feedback, and they just weren't visualizing anything. So we've moved completely away from that, and now we just do like working prototypes, which is structured, allowed the conversation to be much more productive. Now our danger is sometimes they get too designed, so people start getting design feedback way too early. So that's, can swing the other way. So it's just kind of like building out what you need to build out to keep the project moving.
So when I arrived at the Corning Museum of Glass, meetings were a complete disaster. People would run over, just go over time. There were very few agendas, and people would come in late. And so we created these meeting guidelines, and we posted them in every meeting room in the entire institution. And we also put a clock in every meeting room in the entire institution because there weren't any. So you have to now, according to these meeting guidelines, and people are held to them, you have to start on time, you have to keep the meeting focused on the agenda, and everyone is told when they come to the first meeting, the project kickoff, that it's not just the meeting organizer's job to keep to the agenda. Everyone is expected to help everyone else keep to the agenda. People can take notes on phones and things like that, but if phones are ringing, that's not okay. Interrupting. This is an issue that we've been working a lot on, especially when it comes to women. So I've noticed that women get interrupted a lot, and oftentimes they get interrupted by other women. So we have started what the White House Cabinet female staff calls amplification in our meetings. And when a woman expresses an idea or takes the floor, some other woman in the meeting will repeat what she said in a supportive way. That's if they agree with it. So that way, it's heard twice. And I haven't seen any results yet, but the White House Cabinet staff tells me that they've seen results. So I'm pretty hopeful about that. If you don't have an agenda for your meeting, you're expected to cancel it. And you are expected to wrap up meetings by summarizing action items and end every meeting at 5 minutes before the hour. So that's been the toughest one for me. I actually now, at 5 minutes before the hour, slam my notebook shut, stand up, and say, "This meeting is over." Because people will fill the time. It just is a human thing. And a lot of people were complaining that important decisions were getting made after the meeting was supposed to be over. So I and my colleagues are trying really hard to say, no more discussion, bring it to the next meeting. The other thing that's not on these meeting guidelines is trying to figure out what communication is best. So there's lots of stuff that needs to come to the meeting, but sometimes we hear stuff that could have been handled in an email, that could have been handled if two people had just simply talked before the meeting, or they can talk after the meeting. So we ask all the people in the meeting to really pay attention to what's meeting necessary and handle other kinds of communication after the fact or before the meeting or in personal communications. So now that we've got this arc of the collaboration set where we've got very clear roles defined and goals defined in the very beginning, and the meeting guidelines are set in stone, and everybody understands what is expected of them, then I actually ask people to step outside of their roles, because I'm the champion in the museum of good ideas come from everywhere. And I expect people, if they have a good idea, just because it's not in their department, I expect them to share it. And I'm always asking, pushing people to collaborate with colleagues in cross-departmental ways, even though it might not be in their wheelhouse, doesn't mean they don't have a good idea.
One of the ways to make those meetings a place where people can collaborate or feel free to talk out loud, bring up their ideas, is to start everybody on the same page. In an interdepartmental team, we're literally coming from different places. That's just a reality. And so doing something to get everyone in the same place at the same time, whether it's doing a quiet 1 to 2 minute meditation exercise, or conducting a group check-in, which can be as simple as what did you have for breakfast, as involved as how are you feeling, depending on your trust level, or something like what's the highlight of your work week? What are you really proud of this week? You know, small things like that can go a long way towards building a culture of collaboration.
Another approach is also things that are coming out of design thinking, like improv games. I've joined a couple of the design thinking improv games with Dana Silvers at this conference and the last conference, Museums in the Web, and it's been really fun and effective. You come to meetings sometimes with a certain mindset, reservations, fears, attitude, and these games really help clear your state of mind, clear the slate, and remind everyone that, you know, we're all in this together. According to the National Institute of Play, there is a lot, this is from their website, there is a lot of academic research on the value of play and its importance not just to childhood development, but to adult life. Play, games, and the principles that underlie them have vital roles in building critical skills like systems thinking, creative problem solving, collaboration, empathy, and innovation.
So throughout, as we were talking about the arc of the project, building trust and relationships is of course super important. But it's not just because you want to work with your friends. Like there's, you know, you need to trust people who aren't your friends, who you don't know outside of work. And there's actual science behind teams that trust each other work more effectively, whether or not they know each other outside of work, especially teams working under conditions of uncertainty and interdependence, which in my opinion are interdepartmental teams and digital teams. They need this concept called psychological safety. That's where you're not afraid to say something to the group. You don't feel like you'll be judged personally when you say something. There's, you know, it's the science behind the no judgment zone. And there's a lot of different ways to build this, including how you start your meetings, but also just having these sort of team building exercises, which seems silly, but it's very effective.
Yeah, and at the end, we'll want to solicit your ideas for what you guys do on the ongoing basis.
Well, and speaking of that, so when you work on a project together, you want to trust each other, feel comfortable with who you are and what you're saying, right? So this was kind of funny. The image on the left there is from a friend of mine who works at a university in Hawaii, and they had a barefoot meeting, you know. And on Facebook, I was like, well, does this help collaboration? And I loved what she said. She said, maybe freedom of toes, you know, feeling comfortable enough with each other to just go barefoot. I love that. And then recently, Green Door Labs had a tweet thread about, you know, what you do to bond with your teammates, with your staff. And, you know, I responded, Nikhil Trivedi, who I also work with at the Art Institute, responded. And, you know, we have this great thing where we do One Song Fridays. Everybody in our group gets together, whether you play guitar or not, and just play a song and, you know, make something up if you don't know. And it's just a really nice, it's a lovely space to like share and enjoy something that's, you know, not work related. And then also we have a fish tank that the whole department actually helps take care of. And, you know, it's just nice to relate to each other and build a relationship that's not completely work related. And, you know, and then other things that people can do, there's drinking and all that stuff, but, you know, even just doing like a gallery tour together, you know, can be a great idea.
I have a good example that I wanted to share. It does involve drinking, but we have it's grandfathered in institution. Every Friday at 4:30, everyone heads down to the zoology classroom for beer. And I can't tell you how many conflicts that has helped loosen up. It's helped me with so many communications with people around the building because you're just relaxed. It's the end of the week and you can just have a nice chat. And the other thing that is good about it is it's launched a lot of projects because you realize, oh, you're working on that thing, you should join in and help us with this. So it's this great forum to have, and it's every Friday, so it's structured and we always look forward to it. And I think it's that regularity that's important, just like your One Song Friday too.
Yeah. And I forgot to mention that, you know, this bonding experience also breaks down the stereotypes. Like instead of you being seen as the developer, the curator, the project manager, you know, you're kind of seeing each other as people and possibly friends.
Great. So, rounding out the arc of our presentation. So what does all this mean? We have projects, we start them, we come together, we work on them, and then what is that? We launch, and then what? I think there's a lot of important moments towards the end and beyond based on the work that we do. Just because of our evolving field, technology changes the way we work on it, changes the way we work together, changes. So to constantly synthesize that and think about what that means is so important, and why we're here right now. I think to be able to reflect on and then adapt processes as you go is crucial. At the end of a project, you can have a debrief. A lot of times those can go really poorly because it just turns into finger pointing, people kind of complaining. But if you focus on the actual process of how you worked on that thing, if it was like a website or an in-gallery kiosk, and talk about it in that context, you'll get a lot more positive feedback. And then you can kind of structure out these process templates maybe, or starting points for when you go into it the next time. You should be able to promote and participate in a collaborative culture. And I think that just going on the building trust relationships, just talking to one another, being a team, asking them how they're doing, how you can help, talking about what you're struggling with, and just that maintaining that sense of openness is so important going forward, because then when you go into the next project, because we continue, there's variations of the group, but where I am, we end up working together again on a new project, kind of the same people. So it just kind of keeps that evolving. And then just bigger picture from going from there, to use your voice and share your experience to incite change. And that's inside your institution and among with your colleagues. We get a lot of mandates of what we have to develop and do. We'll say, well, we want this touch screen for this, produce it. And I've been able to push back on that quite a bit just based on how it's affected the team and how we've worked, and the outcomes have really changed, and our development department has stopped writing in specific delivery methods into their proposals. Or at least they're moving in that direction, and that was just like a huge win when they finally realized that we're not just putting a label on a touch screen. It's like, thank you. It's just, I think just to keep talking about it and use your voice. It's terrifying when you talk. I'm on the ground person. I don't have any seniority. So to talk to the upper echelons and be able to do it succinctly is so important. So I think to take it more to a meta level, because we collaborated on this collaboration presentation, we wanted to kind of take it full circle and talk about what we learned from our experience working over the summer together. I guess I'll go first. It was a great refresher for me to just sit back and trust. I tend to, worry that things won't get done or feel like I need to have control. And when you just take the time to sit back, and I'm just reminded how awesome the people that we work with are.
One thing which putting this presentation together made me realize is balancing the individual versus the group voice, and how easy it is to sit back and let groupthink take over a project of any kind, and how important it is to pipe up and have dissonance within a project, because it makes it more
Rigorous.
Yes, exactly. Rigor. And sometimes that's really difficult as a curator to come to a project and be kind of the party pooper, but it's also kind of important and makes things better, I think, I hope.
Well, it's just been really interesting to hear the methods that the others have used that we're planning to talk about for this presentation. So, Chris talking about what she does with meetings at the museum was just so interesting to me. And we also touched on a lot of things that weren't in the presentation. We just talked out loud, and we were sort of like therapy for each other. We had a lot of discussion about what we've been going through at our institution. So, and we've talked about, continuing this collaboration and this therapy group. So.
Yeah, and for me, working with these other young women has been such a pleasure because it's a true collaboration. So Tina really led the charge, and she sort of maintained that leadership role. Everybody else was happy to let her have it, but not let her take it all on. Everybody else pitched in equally, I think. And I was very happy to learn that last night Taylor was going to put a picture in a slide for me, and Ariel said, "Don't do it. Trust Chris." And then Ariel used what I call the back channel, which I use a lot. She came to me and said, Taylor was trying to put a picture in for you, so you better put a picture in there. And I did.
Oh, man.
It's working. You're a project manager. You're forgiven.
Well, we do have quite a bit of time left, but I think that's good because we want to hear from you, if we don't mind putting you on the spot. We've got some prompt questions up there. I know we kind of talked about a lot of different things, so hopefully it jogs your memory. But if you have any advice, tips, lessons learned, anything, like answers to those questions.
Easy icebreakers.
So, being also very intimately involved with the project that you guys talked about a lot, my name's Michael, and I work at the Art Institute. I just wanted to applaud you guys. I thought that was really great, thoughtful, and well done.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Michael thought it was thoughtful and well done.
I think the thing that I would add and maybe prompt some conversation is relative to this first question is, yes, of course, one believes in collaboration, but I think within collaboration, knowing one's expertise and what one can bring to the table is also helpful. So you guys all speak to different levels of specialty, and I think within a collaboration, knowing when you are bringing something really real and valuable to the table is a skill that one develops. If it's collaboration kind of flat, so that everybody has an opinion on everything else, I think that can be challenging.
Very challenging.
So just wanted to add that, maybe prompt some other discussion from it.
That's totally something I've struggled with, trying to figure out who's a more valuable collaborator or whose opinion matters when. I would really love if you guys have suggestions on how to handle that because it's really hard and it's a lot of interpersonal stuff. But also maybe it goes back to job description where you just look at your job description and you say, hey, this is what I've been hired to do, so I'm going to do it. I don't know.
Douglas is shaking his head.
So I actually tweeted out a picture of this book cover, but so collaboration is a great umbrella to describe the spirit of how you agree to work together. It's not a methodology.
Right.
And if you have the spirit with no methodology, chaos, right? Nobody knows what the role is, everyone doesn't know when to speak. Am I supposed to affirm? Why am I in this meeting? So, we're using Scrum as a methodology for really seeing how you create the team and how the team is run and what the responsibility of each person is for that effort. Because all of us are on many teams, I'm sure, right? And there are teams where I'm in very much a leadership role and driving things ahead. There are teams, I'm just the executive sponsor, I'm only there to help if asked. But I need to know that going in so I don't upset every apple cart whenever I walk in the room.
Yeah, so I think that's why it's important to establish what you were saying, Taylor, roles and responsibilities, with everyone with the project to start.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the design, interface designer is going to have, let's say you're designing something that goes in an exhibition and they have the overall art direction, idea, look and feel, they're going to be the ones that, create it and sign off on it with the larger team. So yeah, it's at what point everyone contributes to those ideas and development, but there is one team member that does lead the charge and will kind of take it into execution, whatever aspect of the project it is. And knowing who that is critical. I saw a hand in the back and then one here.
I mean, something that has helped me quite a bit is to not have so intent. At the beginning of my work, I was so excited to show people my work and what I do. What I having put it as a thinking about it every day is it's not about me, and that really has helped bring guys. But I know we cannot change maybe all the collaborative environment at once, but we start by ourselves doing good things.
Yeah, that's really great. Did everyone hear it was just about looking within and understanding what you can do first and before looking outward? I think that's really, really good.
Yeah, Yeah, and I think you also have to be responsible for yourself. Sometimes it's a struggle for me because I do have experience in design and education in the past. When we're in a project meeting and there is a designer there, but that's not my role now. It's hard for me sometimes to, not say something, right? And I feel like, I kind of have to pick and choose. Like, if it's important enough, I will definitely say something. But also there's the other side where you have to sit back and trust, the other people on your team.
I'm actually looking for some advice. I've got a new team at the High, and so obviously we haven't had a media technology team before, so we're just a year old. And it's that relationship between the staff having worked with vendors before and understanding the difference perhaps of what it's like to have in-house help. And maybe where we need to be in early, even though we're media technology.
Yeah, so you're saying you have an internal staff now rather than relying on.
And we're new.
Yeah. At what phase of the project are you taking things over?
Sometimes we're initiating, and sometimes things are brought to us probably to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because that was obviously a model that worked with vendors.
Yeah.
We're a different model now.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually, and I think Art Institute is another good example of this, but the Field Museum has made a big shift towards hiring internally, and we feel like we've harnessed all this power, so how do we use it effectively? So it's just something that I've been advocating for as more of the intermediary person, is getting these people to the larger team meetings, because we'll be designing an exhibition and getting them in there sooner rather than later. And if I have to fight for it, I will, because it will lead to mistakes down the road. And I've also done the vendor projects, and those are its own beast. But earlier is better. And we tend to come at the end of the entire project phase, and it's just, we never have the timeline to develop these concepts, or people have thought through it. They think they have thought through it and think they know what they're getting. So I would just keep pushing earlier, and just push your testing process forward and be like, well, we got to start prototyping and just start doing it.
So, Mike, if I were you, I would go rogue and show, not tell. So I would just show them what you can do, because that's going to speak volumes. And maybe you can pick a little project that's low stakes, but once people see what you're capable of, they're going to start coming to you more in the beginning, I think. Definitely a show, don't tell problem.
Was there a question in the back? Yes.
I was going to respond to Douglas's comment about collaboration not being a methodology, which is a hugely important point. So I work at SFLMA, and we use a lot of different methods to help define projects. And to varying degrees of success, for actually defining a workflow, we use a system called RACI, which some of you are probably aware of, but it's responsibility, accountability, consulting, and informing. So you basically can list out every single line item of a project, and then list out who's responsible for it, who's accountable for it, who needs to be consulted on it, and who needs to be informed about it. And then you can share that back out so everybody knows exactly what their role is from the get-go. And then another thing that we use, which is really valuable, but it's a sort of a whole other presentation in and of itself, and how to disseminate it, but project management software. So we use Asana, which we love, to a weirdly English degree. But it's been really interesting, because we took our vision, took it upon itself to sort of start using this project management software for all of our projects. And we've really taken this kind of like flag roll approach to it. We weren't trying to, because I think if you try and impose something on somebody who's not ready for it, or is scared of it, or doesn't want to do it, it just puts up a huge barrier. And so we've just been kind of quietly doing our thing with it, and everybody is like, we'll be in meetings and we'll have it up, and we're like, what is that?
See, you're not telling people to use it, you're showing them what's possible.
Exactly. And so now we have curators on there, our exhibitions team is on there, we're getting, our education and public practice team is on there, so it's really starting to make its tentacles out there, and everybody's starting to, it's becoming institutionalized by sheer organic effort.
That's really great, because what a way to log all that activity and work, to be able to share it, upwards and be like, this is what has to come together in order to execute these projects. And I think that speaks to, just constantly being flexible and changing and informing your people who you work with about how things go. So when you have everything logged on a platform like that, I use Asana a little bit too. I think it just becomes more powerful as it grows.
I just wanted to ask about the relationship between project-based collaboration and project management and the general ethos of collaboration with the institution. Because you were talking about on projects, how you get people collaborating. You were also talking about methods like improv and going out and have drinks that are more about just changing the whole culture. And how do you see the relationship between those two things? And the reason I ask is because I'm in a situation like Mike, where I'm also trying to get people to change culture a little bit, see me as a resource, and blah, blah, blah. And I've run into a challenge where I have cross-departmental meetings, and that psychological safety that is so important and has been recognized by a group of us that are working together, and we're getting pushback that you're not doing anything in the meeting, because you're not, and we've talked about how we're sort of a support group for each other, which I feel is so important that has happened, and yet we don't have validation within the institution that is valuable. We're actually getting sort of shut down a little bit.
Wow.
So what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think hopefully all you can do is just stick with it, and hopefully it starts to spread throughout the institution, because really, I don't know, I mean, without senior management buy-in, without like an edict from the top about cultural change, then that's the only way it can be, is like just grassroots.
Is there anyone above you that you can show the value of this to?
I'm trying with my manager. Yeah. But
What's been her response?
she flips and she flops.
Okay.
One day she loves it, she thinks it's awesome, and then another day she's telling me, you guys are spending too much time.
Better to sign something on that. I was actually, since I spoke up anyway, I was actually wondering if you have any tips or experience in getting out of collaboration. I find, no, I don't
Yeah.
know people that much.
Yeah.
But I find that I'm happy to be collaborative in a team, but at some point they might not need me anymore, but I continue to be included on the Slack channels and the meetings and everything. And it either has to be on me to kind of gracefully exit, or I just continue to go, whatever, or the vice versa, I need someone else in the team who doesn't really need to be there anymore.
Right. So on the meeting guidelines, what I didn't cover is that the new rules, the new meeting guidelines are that if you don't see a point for attending the meeting, then you check in based on the agenda, which you have to have. So if you don't see a point for yourself attending the meeting, then you are allowed to check in with the meeting organizer ahead of time and say, listen, I'm thinking about not coming, I'm not sure you guys need me. And if the organizer says that's fine, you don't show up. And that's like a written, approved, it's okay for everybody to do.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think just talking to those people and be like, am I needed in this meeting? Well, yeah, we love you. But, just maybe kind of, and just having like, a conversation, like, what are the things that you need from me? And
And I think too, just on like the general process side of things, it's kind of inerrant, towards the end of the project, we have what we call content developers at the field. Instead of the curators, the content developers do all the writing. Towards the end of the project, they're done onto other things, onto the next thing, because they do a lot of the more front end work. So it's just kind of like whatever process you have built out, and you can kind of scatter the team roles across that timeline, if you will. And it's just kind of like, oh, well, yeah, like so-and-so really doesn't need to be here anymore, and that's okay. Yeah, go ahead.
The museum meeting guidelines, I'm really curious about this as December 1st is approaching. The white collar exception laws are starting to come in. And with nonprofit employment, I think we're actually going to start really thinking about people's time based on hours, because all of a sudden 40 hours
Yes.
actually does have to count. How did you go about implementing that process at your institution? Was it through the director, operations?
You mean the meeting guideline process? It was really Scott Sayer and I came into that institution and went to a bunch of meetings and said, "Oh my God, this is crazy." So we went to the COO, and he was new as well. And we said, "Have you noticed that the meetings are crazy?" And he said, "Yes, I have noticed." And he and Scott formed a task force. At that point, I stepped out because those guys have got it. And they came up with the guidelines. They shopped them with the leadership team. And Scott is on the leadership team as well as I am. So I was a advocate for them when they came to the leadership team. And the COO is the one who's presented them. And then once they got approved by the leadership team, Scott and the COO just said, we're making a plaque and we're putting them in every room and we're putting a clock in every room. And, the leadership team said, well, yeah, they're approved, so do whatever you want. And then it was, of course, a process of educating everyone, but that was easy to do because it came from the top. Scott and the COO made a presentation at the communications meeting and said, these are the new meeting guidelines, you're going to see them in the meeting rooms, you're all expected to adhere to them, and they said, and the leadership team, we'll set an example here. We're not going to be the ones who violate our own guidelines. I know you all suspect, sure, they're great for us, but you guys will do whatever you want as usual, but we didn't. The leadership team is absolutely committed to holding fast to the meeting guidelines.
So kind of touching on your question about what do you do to build trust and relationships, and one thing that happened to me recently, a few months ago, I finished a project with a curator that was a huge pain in the butt to do, wait, and we never thought it would end, and it did.
Congratulations.
Wasn't something that either of us were especially proud of. It was like completely grand. And she wrote me a handwritten thank you note and stuck like a Starbucks gift card in it, and sent through the inter-office mail. And it was like so rewarding to reflect on this project and be acknowledged and kind of celebrate finishing it. And it made me really think more critically about how I acknowledge people that I work with and how I celebrate our accomplishments, whether they're small or large.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important part of collaboration and trust in any relationship. Like you have celebrations with your significant other or friends, so why not also do that with
Right.
the relationships with your colleagues? So, my thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think just even in like day-to-day dialogue, like compliments and talking kindly, I was in the sessions start to blend together at this point, but we had the conversation about like caring for each other and empathy, and so those little things go a long way and create lasting impacts.
Yeah, and I think like rituals are really important. Like the way you start a meeting is a ritual that says now the meeting is starting, or like when you end a project, you have a party, or like you exchange thank you notes because that means the project is over. And like having these sort of norms is somehow really important. And we tend to want to work really quickly and ignore those parts of projects like that. But I think they have, they've got like a meaning that we don't normally acknowledge.
Yeah, and I think, just saying thank you, great work. Also, there was a project that I worked on at the Field Museum, actually, and at the end of the project, the editors that were creating the document where you acknowledge everyone they were asking, should we just acknowledge everyone as a department, or should we put everybody's names on this plaque or document? And they ended up putting everybody's names on it, and it just felt really good to see your name on that. And I don't think that that's expensive. Hopefully it's not expensive to just add everybody's names on something. and just, seeing your name on that feels good.
Are there any more questions? Because otherwise I think we're at 4 o'clock, so thank you guys.
Thank you.